I frequently get asked questions about how I started NTX Vinyl from other collectors, from friends, family, even customers who are really interested about getting into the business or just getting a behind the scenes look about what it actually takes. So I figured it would make a cool video to tell that story. But even more interesting is why I started NTX Vinyl. That's where we'll start after the break on this episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent record shops in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're not local, but you are in the US, you can shop online at ntxvinyl.com. Would love it if you'd subscribe to our channel on YouTube, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. All right, so we're going to talk about how and why I started a thriving vinyl record business. That's a pretty good word, I think, to describe NTX Vinyl right now. And honestly, the vinyl industry as a whole. But I left you with a little bit of a cliffhanger there. So why did I start NTX Vinyl? I'm going to tell you right off the bat, but I guess my disclaimer here is that this is probably going to be long-winded because I like talking about records, as you can tell. And if I'm going to tell the story of NTX Vinyl, even in some sort of truncated form, it's going to be pretty lengthy. So sit back and enjoy if this is the type of thing you're interested in. So why did I do this? Why did I start NTX Vinyl? There was a singular reason, and I'm being completely transparent. The reason why I started this company, this side business, if you will, is because I wanted more records for myself. That is plain and simple why it all began, and I'll tell you exactly kind of what transpired. Going back a couple years, so it's been 3 years since I started NTX Vinyl. It was technically July of 2019. That's a very important date to remember because that's pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, right? Going back a few years before 2019 when I started NTX Vinyl, I had really ramped up collecting. I've been collecting for 25 plus years, but I would say, you know, since the early 2000s through up to that 2019, I had really ramped up collecting and gotten to a point, my personal collection, where I was just spending too much money. I had capped out from a monthly standpoint of like, I was just spending several $100s a month. It wasn't scalable. No matter how many albums I bought and kind of sold one-offs here along the way, like it wasn't paying for the amount of records that I was purchasing. So I had to figure something out. The best way I could figure out how to do that, first and foremost, was to start buying in bulk, right? Buying records one by one, whether you're a record store, whether it's pre-owned, whether it's new, or whether it's online, it doesn't matter. It's expensive. You know that. I know that. That's the game we're in. Even back pre-pandemic, it was still expensive. It's an expensive hobby. It is. There's no way around that, right? So I'd kind of hit that wall, and I said, I can't keep spending this many hundreds of dollars a month. So the first thing I started doing was, hey, well, how are record stores doing this? Well, they're buying in bulk, right? That's the way you do it. It's obviously going to be cheaper if you're going to buy, in most cases, 100 records versus 5 records, right? Depending on how you go about it. And so that was the first step I took, was figuring out how to buy collections. Now, again, this is pre-pandemic, so it was a little easier back then because there wasn't this huge vinyl boom that we've gone through in the last couple of years. So I started hitting Craigslist, I started hitting garage sales, I started hitting estate sales, I started hitting Facebook Marketplace, all the typical ways that you would find collections when someone is moving, when someone has passed away and their collection is then up for sale, those types of things. So that's kind of what got the ball rolling for NTX Vinyl, was I got my feet wet buying used record collections. I mentioned all the different places where you can do that still to this day, but it's harder now because a lot more people know that vinyl is kind of hot, and so they protect it a little more or charge a little more premium for it versus just putting it out on the curb, which, believe it or not, used to happen. And Probably still does in some places. But so I started buying collections. You know, that could have been 20 records, could have been 100 records. And then as I scaled up, it got more and more. And again, that's what kind of lit the fire as I started to see how record stores work. You know, it wasn't rocket science. You know, you go out and you talk with people and you communicate and you cut a deal and you get some great records, right? So I would go out and I would buy, again, let's say 100 records. I would probably keep maybe 60 or 70 of those, and I'd have this leftover of 30 or 40 records, and I didn't want them because they weren't for me, whether they're the wrong genre, just music that I didn't like, or maybe they were duplicates that are out of my collection. So I would turn around and do the same thing. I would go back to Facebook or Craigslist or wherever, and I would list those records and hopefully recoup the money I paid for the initial collection. That was my whole goal, was just to break even, because again, I was just looking to you know, embellish my collection and add to my collection, right? So that went on for, I would say, a good 2 years probably. And I'd gotten to a point where I was buying larger collections. I remember the first, what I consider to be a large collection at the time, which was several hundred records. And I think I probably paid $1,000 for it, which at the time was incredibly nerve-wracking because I had to use my family's personal money to go out on a limb and buy this collection, and then have the confidence in myself to know that I would be able to you know, turn around enough of those records to recoup those funds, and again, then get to keep the records, right? That was the whole game. And that went on for, again, for many months. And I remember it came to this, this very important night. I was out to dinner with my wife, and I was telling her about this antique mall, or marketplace, if you will, thrift store, whatever you want to call it. I'll talk more about that as far as how it specifically works. But it had opened up just down the street, literally a quarter mile from me where I live, which is our Highland Village location. Again, 30 minutes north of Dallas, so not in downtown proper, right? But it had opened up right by our house, and I thought, man, that would be kind of cool if there was a little booth in there that sold records. I went through and no one was selling records in there. I was kind of disappointed. There's other thrift stores in the area, and of course, DFW is a big metroplex, so there's tons of antique malls or stores, whatever you want to call them, that have booths with records, whether it be a crate or an entire booth full of records. Not my idea, obviously. I've been shopping in thrift stores and antique malls, and if you've been a record collector, you probably have too for years and years. That's not a new thing. But the fact that it opened right down my house was really cool, and I like the fact that it was a really upscale, what I would call boutique marketplace, meaning antique mall is really not the right word for it because there's no antiques. It's mostly new goods. It's mostly people who have craft businesses or selling home goods or whatever it may be. And they've got little booths, and they pay a couple $100s a month to have their space, and they have a little hobby out of it, right? So this opened up nearby me, and I was telling my wife about it, that there was no one there selling records, and there's no one else really in this area that was doing it. And I said, man, I think I just need one good collection, because at that point, again, I had been building up, and I had crates all over the house of extra records that I was attempting to sell and bundle, but I was in no hurry because, again, this was just all for my personal use. But I told my wife, I think if I could just get one nice big collection, that would help me snowball potentially the idea into something a little more than me just kind of piecing out the ones I didn't want. I didn't know what that meant at the time. I didn't know. I knew the Painted Tree Marketplace, as it's called, that boutique marketplace I mentioned, where my shops are. I knew it had opened up, and again, I've been to other locations like that in the area, and knew it could be successful on some level, but I'm out in the middle of the suburbs, so I didn't really know if that was the right thing, but it was there and it was interesting. And I said, if I could just get one collection, maybe that would work, but I don't know. Are people going to buy records in this area? Again, this is pre-COVID, so vinyl was not on fire like it is now and like it has been for the last 2 years. But if I could get that one collection, it would give me the opportunity to maybe explore something like that. Literally, like 2 days later, I bought like 2,000 records. It just fell in my lap. I remember getting a really good deal on it. It wasn't all gold, but there were a lot of records that I already had, and there were a lot of records that I knew would be desirable if I was to sell them in some way. But again, I wasn't sold on the fact that just opening up a booth in this is and grabbing some tables and some crates and throwing some records out and putting prices on them. I wasn't convinced that was going to work. It seemed a little too rudimentary for me personally. So I had to test it out. So that was the first big thing I did after getting that collection, was I decided I've got to test this market. I've got to figure out if location was going to be worth it. Like any business, it's all about location, right? And I mentioned I'm out in the suburbs. I'm not in an arts district. I'm not in a district, in an area that has any sort of nightlife. There's certainly retail here in regards to shopping, but straight up suburbia, as you'd imagine, tons of people, which is key, but not a lot to go off of as far as, walk by traffic or that type of thing. So how did I test it? I put up a pop-up sale in my garage. I'll show you pictures of it. It was pretty amazing. This is June of 2019, just before I opened that first shop. I had, I think, around 2,500 or 3,000 records for sale. I converted my whole garage into a pop-up record store. I created the name. I literally had the idea on a Sunday after I'd gotten that collection. I created the name NTX Vinyl just because North Texas obviously is where I live. The University of North Texas is just north of where I live, the university, and I thought it would be a great name just to kind of encompass a local feel. Created the name, created a Facebook page, created a Facebook event, which is critical for this pop-up, right? Now the location, again, was in my house, so it was undisclosed until literally the day before. But I started advertising it, and I just basically put out a nicely designed ad. It said pop-up record store, RSVP location to be announced just prior to the event. I had several hundred RSVPs. In fact, I'll go back and check the number. I think there were maybe 300 or 400 RSVPs. I'm making that up, but it sounds about right. In the end, the event was an absolute success, and I couldn't believe it. I transformed my garage. I built shelving. I built displays. I had tons of bins of records. I had everything organized into genres. I spent I want to say probably about 2 or 3 months pricing records for that event, because I priced every single one of them myself. There were certainly some dollar bin records, but there were, probably over 1,000 records priced, which at the time was not only a lot of records, but for me, who had never priced a record, I had to learn how to do it. I had to build up my confidence in how to do that. So a lot of research, a lot of scouring Discogs and reading what other people had to say about how to price records. So I went through that whole thing. The day of the pop-up record store, which again was essentially a garage sale, there were people waiting at my gate to get in. It was unbelievable. The cops did end up coming because there were cars parked everywhere, despite what I told people. It didn't matter. The neighbors had no idea what was going on. I should have tipped them off, but I didn't want to spoil the fun by letting anyone raise any red flags before it even happened, right? So throughout that day, I realized the main thing that had to convince me to open up that first shop, and that was my local area will work. Despite the fact that I'm out in the suburbs, there was enough demand in this area, and people drove from all the Metroplex, of course, but I was really focused on just being hyper-local at first. And there was enough people I knew who I'd talked to that day that were from the surrounding areas, that if I did decide to open up that little first shop, that there would be hopefully enough demand. Now, it was a commitment because, you got to sign a lease at these places. So I had to commit for 6 months. So that was another big deal because I had to shell out a couple $1,000, 6 months rent. I think it was $250 or $300 a month for that first little space I had. So you can do the math, 6-month lease. So not a massive investment, but again, this is my own personal money at this point. From the pop-up sale, I had recouped the money I had invested and made enough to spin it into what was my first shop, which I'll show you a picture of. Very small, I think I had 3 or 4 shelves starting out and just a couple hundred records, all pre-owned, all stuff mostly that was left over from that initial pop-up sale. So I kind of, again, I snowballed the pop-up sale into the first booth, if you will. And in that time, I think it was July 4th weekend, 2019 is when I had the grand opening of NTX Vinyl. I had already branded it a little, obviously, with the pop-up sale, but I don't really consider that the real opening because it was just in my garage, right? But that first weekend, I remember opening up and just being like, I have no idea if people are going to show up. But I had that event, and so I had a way to promote to these people who not only attended at the pop-up sale, but all the other people who RSVP'd who didn't get a chance to come on that singular day. Now I had a location, right? And again, it was just a couple hundred records, so there was nothing to go crazy about. But people were really supportive, and I was blown away on that opening weekend. The marketplace I'm in, which is again Painted Tree Marketplace, you can Google it. It's a pretty large company. They have locations all over the South. I think they've got maybe 30, 40 locations now, many in the DFW area, which I'll get to. But the response was amazing. And what I was going to say is the Painted Tree allows you to see what sells. So I could log into my account, and as records were selling that first week, I was able to refresh and see what was selling. And I was just absolutely blown away by at the end of the first day, second day, and into the weekend, how many records it sold. And at that point, I'm just thinking, wow, this is amazing. People are actually showing up and going into my record store and shopping, which was just unbelievable. The other thing I'll say before I get into the nuts and bolts of the tactical timeline of what I did from there is I never intended to open a record store. I really didn't. It just snowballed step by step. I was never the type of person who aspired to be behind the counter or the record store. I certainly didn't put together a business plan. I didn't kind of have the foresight to think, oh, this is going to be a long-term venture where I eventually, start making into something that could maybe become lucrative down the road. Never did it because I thought I was going to get rich off of it, obviously, and certainly didn't want to take away any more time than I already was in regards to my vinyl addiction, but here we are. So it was an amazing opening weekend, and I couldn't believe the response. That was July 2019. So those first, let's just say 6 to 8 months were great. Things were small, things were scrappy. About, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 months in, I started dabbling in, I wonder if people will buy new records. I didn't know how to do that. I've never been in retail, never worked in retail, unless you consider me bagging groceries when I was 15 years old. That's the closest I've ever been to a retail environment. So I didn't know a lot about how, wholesaling works, how distribution works, all that. I figured it all out by myself. Google was a powerful tool. Started making connections and getting accounts with distributors just to see if anyone would buy new records. So I remember the first order I purchased of wholesale new records was probably about that big. It was probably 20, 30 records because, again, wholesale records are going to cost you $15, $18, $20, $25 a record, and that's a lot of money out of pocket for someone like me who is really just scraping by as this thing was a hobby at this point, more or less. And so it was very, very small taste of new records. I put them out, and they sold. I couldn't believe it. They didn't all sell, but I could tell that, yeah, people are into this. And of course, I'm stocking everything that I love. At this point, it's all rock, alternative, classic rock, metal, punk, all that. I probably had a little bit of R&B and country in those early days as well, like I do now. But again, it was a reflection of what I know, what I love, and what's on the wall behind me now, honestly. But new records were selling well too. And I was like, well, that's really cool. People don't only like the pre-owned stuff. They'll also come to this environment, which was this booth in this boutique marketplace, and they'll buy new records. That's pretty cool. I didn't know if that would work in this area as well, but it proved itself pretty quickly. And I started ramping that up. It took a lot of time to ramp up. I mean, I think I had just 1 or 2 crates or bins of new records for quite a while because, again, it takes a lot of cash flow to kind of be able to purchase volume when you're paying $15, $20 per record, right? So new records had started to funnel in, and then we roll into 2020 and the pandemic hits. March of 2020, I kind of thought the whole thing would probably be done. Retail shuts down. The Painted Tree Marketplace shuts its doors like all other non-essential retail did at this point. And I kind of thought, man, I don't know if that place will survive. Like I didn't know stability-wise what that looked like. So maybe that was it. I remember going to my booth and pulling all of my records out because I didn't know if it was going to be closed for weeks or months or forever. So they advised everyone, hey, if you want any of your inventory, come and get it. You've got till this date to get it out. So I did, pulled all of them out, and I had crates of, many hundreds of records at that point, maybe 1,000 records, all over my office, which is where I'm sitting now. And I thought, what do I do now? Like, I can kind of just call it quits and do a fire sale and get rid of all of this stuff. But I had some momentum. Again, I'd been doing this for 6-8 months at this point. So the Facebook, the Facebook page, my Instagram, had started to grow a little bit. I kicked that all off when I did the garage sale pop-up store. And so I had a little bit of momentum on social media at that point. And I thought, well, I've got kind of two choices. I can just call it quits because I have no idea if I'm going to be able to reopen this booth, or when I can reopen this booth, if there's going to be any appetite for it, because maybe the momentum was gone, right? That's not what I did. I decided to go the opposite route. I said, well, I can't sell records in store anymore because my store isn't open. I didn't know when it was going to reopen. It turns out it was closed for about 2 months, I think, if I remember correctly. But my other option was just to double down online. I had Facebook and Instagram, and they were starting, a couple hundreds of people engaged at that point, most of them very hyper locally, who were shopping at my store because I wasn't selling much online at all. Maybe the random record on Discogs or something was all I was really selling, or maybe eBay, but I didn't have anything really set up to sell online. But that's when I got creative. I decided, man, let's start doing some fun stuff on social media. Let's try some auctions. Let's try some raffles. Let's try some giveaways and some contests. So I started doing all that stuff. And that was super fun because everybody was stuck at home. Nobody was going out and doing anything. So you want to talk about Friday nights, Saturday nights, I was doing 3-4 hour long auctions. And if you're watching this and you participated in any of those, I know you know what I'm talking about. I called it like the cabin fever vinyl auction or whatever, because everyone was stuck at home with nothing to do. And they couldn't go spend their money on concerts or restaurants or all this stuff. And so they had extra money. So that certainly played into it. At this point, the government was subsidizing everybody. So there was extra checks coming in. So all of that played into it. And people were just looking for something to do at home, not only participating online with something, but spinning records. A lot of people started collecting. A lot of people who had been passive collectors now became serious collectors. So all that definitely played into the trajectory of NTX Vinyl. The other thing that happened right in that time frame when I started really experimenting online and seeing how engaged the audience was with what I was doing on Facebook and Instagram was I launched my website. I launched the online store, and I'll tell you why I did that. And again, all of these are small pieces of the puzzle, but as COVID hit in March, obviously schools shut down and virtual school became a thing. Again, had no idea how long that was going to last. Some people, depending on where you're at in the country or the world, it lasted a lot longer or shorter. For us, it was, probably a 6-week thing. Before our kids were able to go back to school. But what I'm getting at here is my wife is a school teacher. She was a school teacher, and she was about to go back to teach in that environment and was super stressed out because she was going to go teach in an environment. She was probably going to get COVID. She was going to bring it home. We're having to homeschool our kids at that point for we don't know how long. So there was all this stress around her going back to work specifically. I worked from home full time anyways. So for me, that stress wasn't there. So I was fully remote. But for her, it was a big stressor. And that's how we came to the decision. You know what? Maybe it's time for you to not go back. Let's just focus on our kids at home. And you can help me with the website, which we can launch. So processing of orders, shipping of orders, customer service, fulfillment, inventory, all the stuff that it takes to run an online e-commerce business of any kind. She stepped in and was able to help me with that and never went back to teaching, or at least still hasn't, right? So that was a big thing, right? Because in order to have a scalable business, local is great, but obviously having an online component where you can expand your audience outside your local area, even just in the DFW area, which is big, the ability to ship records to people was huge, obviously, and being able to ship them all over the United States. I still don't do international, but even just within the US was massive. So I launched the website. The social media presence was absolutely on fire and really, really catching some momentum because of the online site and because of all of the raffles and auctions and giveaways and mystery boxes and just all this fun stuff I was doing. I was just making it up on the spot, trying to figure out how to keep people engaged so that if and when my physical location reopened, I wouldn't have lost that momentum, right? And it really did work, and it was really really a testament to social media. I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but as far as small businesses are concerned, man, it is absolutely a game changer, and it has made a world of difference for what NTX Vinyl is and what it's become to this day, right? So then we're in the heat of the pandemic. Retail eventually opens back up, and you've got all the mandates around mask and social distancing and all of that. But we made it through all of that. And what's happening in parallel with that is vinyl is exploding. This is when demand absolutely skyrocketed. Pressing plants got completely overwhelmed because every single artist was at home recording and trying to figure out how to put out new music or how to put out old music, anything that would sell, because they couldn't tour. You had every record label doing the same, scouring their catalog, trying to figure out how to get releases out. You had stores like a Walmart, you had stores like Target really double down on their vinyl selections and what they were doing. So all of that played into the fact that I was this little store, little independent, local family-owned store that had a little bit of a footprint here. Very much right time, right place, which is critical. And so throughout that entire span of 20 and 21, the momentum just continued to build and just started to form into this thing that I was like, wow, this looks like it's a real business now, which again, to me, was a complete surprise. No business plan, again, no foresight on this becoming something real. But at that point, I had a whole bunch of people who were chipping in and helping out. I have friends, longtime friends who were helping out. I had customers who had turned into friends, who have turned into employees. So it's not just me, obviously. It's a whole team effort of people who came together, and to this day have continued to help this thing build, right? It's right around that time when I launched this YouTube channel as well. I'd have to go back and look the exact date, but that was definitely an experiment. I had no intention of ever being the guy on camera like you're seeing me now. I've done plenty of behind the camera work, video production, design, marketing. So I knew how to do it, but I didn't really want to flip the camera around myself. But I had started to do it already when I was doing the social stuff, early pandemic with the auctions and all those types of things. So the YouTube channel and creating this talking about records series was just an extension of that. I was getting more comfortable with like, all right, if I'm going to be that guy and I'm going to be on camera, let's just go for it, right? So again, totally shocked at the response there. I remember exactly when the light bulb kind of went off with YouTube and with the Talking About Records series. It was during Thanksgiving of 21, I believe, whenever the Beatles Get Back miniseries came out, because I did a video on that miniseries, which was very rudimentary video, just saying, hey, my top 10 surprises that from the miniseries. And that was the first video that really caught on. I also had one, which is still one of my most viewed videos, if not the most viewed video, was how to use Discogs. That was a big one too. So I had a couple videos where I saw the engagement become real. And I was like, man, that's pretty amazing. If I can replicate that even once a month or something, that would be pretty cool. And it could maybe turn into something real. So that snowballed. And now I'm approaching 10,000 subscribers on YouTube at the time of filming this, at least, which was amazing, and never really envisioned that either. But the YouTube channel and all of the subscribers and just the support that has brought in and the eyeballs that has brought in for NTX Vinyl has been amazing. And just I get comments all the time, whether it's on the channel or on social media or via email or from customers about the videos that are going out, whether it be talking about records or vinyl for sale or whatever I'm doing. And so that was a huge piece of the momentum as well. And that has allowed me to now open 2 more additional locations. So I've expanded that initial location and opened 2 additional ones. So now I'm in 3 different Painted Tree locations, which again has just been an absolute shock. Honestly, I had no idea. If you would have asked me 3 years ago, hey, do you think you have 3 local little record locations, an online site, a YouTube channel? All came out of nowhere, was completely organic, didn't plan it, didn't really wish for it. It just kind of fell in my lap in a lot of ways. And I'm super thankful for it. I still love what I'm doing. And I tell everybody the minute I don't love it anymore, I'm just going to stop and then I'll just listen to my records. But I don't think that's going to happen. I've gotten to a point now where there's a real appreciation for being the conduit of music for people. Like that's something that I never thought was a thing, but now I get it. Now I get the guy behind the counter of the record store that is there physically. Now I'm not physically in my shop, so there's a little bit of a difference there, but I understand the motivation behind that because it's really cool to be able to get an album, whether it's used, new, reissue, it doesn't matter what it is, be the one to put that on the shelf for someone to buy, or be the one to actually deliver that to someone or ship it to someone. Because again, you're kind of the conduit. Like I'm not writing the music, I'm not putting out, not recording the music, but I'm like a step in the process. And that's a really cool thing. I've had that feeling a number of times, an overwhelming feeling a lot of times when there's big pre-orders and there's a big album that's coming out and a lot of people pre-order it from me. And I think, man, this is really cool. I'm the one getting to deliver this to people so they can enjoy it. And I've been on the other side of that fence, so I know exactly what that feels like. And I still am, because I'm still a customer. I shop at record stores all the time. I buy records all the time for myself. You know, obviously you can see my collection behind me. So I'm still very much in this on both sides as a customer and as a business owner. And to me, I think that's why it works. Like at any point, if I stop collecting personally, I think I'll probably lose the joy in it. And if the joy's not there, then it's time to move on to something else. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I still love listening to records. I love the tactile experience of opening a record and experiencing it, and just again, the experience that it provides versus streaming or any other format for that matter. Vinyl is it for me, and for the foreseeable future, we're just going to keep it rolling. So that's the story. I told you to be a little long-winded. I skipped a lot of important pieces, but those are kind of the main highlights, if you will. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear them, love to hear your feedback on how I've done this. Like I said, I'm sure I've skipped a lot of stuff. So if there's any places where I need to fill in the blanks, feel free and shout out. You can reach us on the YouTube comments, obviously, if you're watching this on any of our social channels, or feel free to email us anytime. You can get me at info@ntxvinyl.com. That'll come straight to me. Love to hear from you. Thanks as always for watching. Really appreciate the time. We'll see you again next time on another episode of Talking About Records.